today. And they said, yeah. And it was like, really? It's that cat? Yeah.
I believe it.
Me too. I was raised very Catholic. I
Yeah.
feel I know this.
Yeah.
Like I know.
Well, we're gonna report on that. Cal Gajraj with us tonight.
Hello,
Dr.
hello.
Julio
Hello.
Capo.
That's me.
And a really fascinating interview coming up with Rajee. Well, welcome to Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only LGBTQ daily evening news. It's time to queer up the news. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, March 30th, and we are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. The world's first live daily queer evening news show. Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight.
Thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ evening news show. Whatever happens, you'll see it.
This evening, we bring you the news and a perspective representing the LGBTQ community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson, and let's welcome anchor Dr. Julio Capo, Jr.
Hi.
He is, that's for his father, by the way. He is an associate professor for the Department of History at Florida International University, as well as the deputy director of the FIU Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab, where he researches inter-American histories with a focus on queer, Latinx, race, immigration, and empire studies. He is the author of the book, Welcome to Fairyland, Queer Miami Before 1940, and currently serves on the board of SunServe Social Services and is the co-captain in their fundraising efforts for the upcoming Florida AIDS Walk. Good evening, Julio.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, and next up, let's welcome anchor Cal Gajraj. He is an award-winning international marketing and public relations consultant helping both nonprofit and for-profit organizations with multifaceted executive management in branding, publicity, and fundraising, including local and global initiatives. His expertise is in growing a brand, creating an e-commerce consumer journey, and launching innovative projects that boost efficiency, expand productivity, and increase revenue growth. Good evening, Cal.
Good evening, everyone.
Well, tonight we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Tuesday, March 30th. We begin by queering up breaking Q news. It's Holy Week. Holy Week begins with shocking revelations that the majority of priests are gay. Holy Week begins in America and around the world this week for Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and that includes for the LGBTQ community. Tonight we explore the world's largest religious organization, the Catholic Church and the Vatican. Last week, the church made worldwide headlines when Pope Francis and the church said it could not bless LGBTQ unions because God could not bless sin. The church has many contradictions, and we explore why the church continues to take this position. After all, what happens when a gay priest bless LGBTQ unions? This contradiction is now being explored by the church itself. Wisconsin's Father Greg Gritton, an openly gay priest, discussed this contradiction, and we thank our news partners at CBS. Watch this.
If there's anything that an LGBTQ person will know, it is that we're going to face opposition.
Yes, Father Greg Gritton said we members of the LGBTQ community.
You're one of very few openly gay priests.
Yeah.
How many?
I've always heard the number thrown out like 10 of us
10.
that are really out there. Yeah. All glory.
There are roughly 38,000 priests in America.
What are you risking by being out?
Sometimes it feels like I have to walk on a tightrope.
I've been carrying a heavy burden.
Father Greg came out to his congregation in this Milwaukee suburb about 3 years ago at age 51.
I am a gay priest and a celibate priest.
This moment came after a lifetime of struggle, serving a church that teaches that acting on homosexual feelings is a sin.
I just want to break the silence. We're here. And for me, Seth, that was part of the hypocrisy that I was watching happen.
Did you feel like a hypocrite when you were up here at the pulpit and not out?
I personally did. It's like wearing a mask. Every day I have to go up there and pretend I'm something that I'm not.
You may wonder if the Vatican is concerned about their congregation, participation, and money. That does not seem to be the case, when studies show more than 75% of Catholics support LGBTQ equality. Father Gritton's congregation shows support. Watch this.
He found folks in his congregation were overwhelmingly supportive.
Does it matter to you that the priest here is gay?
No, that's a positive thing.
Carol and Fred Weber's son had come out to them years earlier.
We went in the closet for a while until we were able to accept it. Of course we loved our son.
Later, they say, having an openly gay priest helped, but the church itself has not been so pleased.
Much of the issue in the Vatican and the Catholic Church is asking their priests to be silent in who you are. But that doesn't stop the love that occurs among those same priests. Watch this.
Father Frederick, as we'll call him, feared losing his salary, health care, church housing, pension, and the authority to minister.
What does it say that you need to do this interview in shadow?
It says that it's not cool to be gay if you're a priest. And if you are gay and a priest both at the same time, you gotta hide one or the other.
He likened that secrecy to the double life of spies.
Did you remain celibate as a priest?
No, I did not. I experimented, I struggled. There were liaisons, there were relationships, and there was love several times.
Love and sexual intimacy with another man?
Yes.
With other priests?
Once or twice.
What happens for these priests that are moral leadership in their community? The LGBTQ community had hopes when the Pope said about LGBTQ, quote, "Who am I to judge?" Well, that may be exactly what Pope Francis is doing, and many priests are feeling the cancer growing in the church. Watch this.
What's the effect of this culture of silence on the church?
It is a slow-moving cancer.
While Pope Francis famously responded, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about gay priests during a papal press conference, he has also said that anyone with deep-seated homosexual tendencies shouldn't be a priest. Their place is not in ministry or in consecrated life.
In the book about Catholic LGBTQ, Building a Bridge, Father James Martin is the most visible LGBTQ advocate in the Catholic Church and suggests this Holy Week that more than half of all the priests are gay. Watch this.
James Martin, a Jesuit priest and author, is the most high-profile advocate for LGBTQ Catholics. And in 2019, Pope Francis requested a meeting with him.
The Vatican put our audience on the Pope's official schedule. They sent out a picture. I met with him in the Apostolic Palace, which is where he meets with presidents and diplomats. It was a pretty strong sign of his support.
The tone is new. The teachings haven't changed.
The teachings haven't changed, but the tone is very important.
And Martin says ultimately Catholic leaders need to shift their thinking.
It's a life issue. We have high suicide rates among LGBT youth, and we also have places in the world where gay people can be arrested and executed for being gay.
He calls Pope Francis the most pro-LGBT pope ever, though acknowledges that's not a high bar. Francis is the first pope to use the word gay publicly.
One of the things I lament is if there were a case of, say, bullying in a parish or in a school, It would be wonderful for the gay priest to get up and say, look, I was bullied as a boy. So there are these life experiences that I think people are missing in the church.
How many gay priests do you think there are?
I'm guessing, maybe 40%. Who knows? If it was 40%, I wouldn't be surprised. If it was 80%, I wouldn't be surprised.
In Frederick Martel's book, In the Closet of the Vatican, he makes explosive statements calling the situation in the church 50 Shades of Gay. Martel says that priests are the last silent community and that gay priests make up a vast silent majority. Watch this.
It is a large silent community, a vast silent majority.
Frédéric Martel is a French author who spent 4 years researching his book In the Closet of the Vatican.
A Rome sex worker who has a law degree, Francesco Capra, has documented his work with Vatican priests. He has a 1,200-page summary of interactions with more than 100 Vatican priests, including graphic pictures, texts, and other documentation. Watch this.
How many priests do you think you have slept with?
I think about 100.
A lot.
We have in Italy many thousands of priests, so 100 is not so much.
Francesco Capra is a sex worker with a law degree who found one priest client led to another and another.
What's this?
It's my dossier about gay priests in Italy.
Over roughly 5 years, Capra compiled this 1,200-page dossier of personal profiles, graphic photos, and text message exchanges with roughly 50 of the priests who were his clients. He submitted it to his local Archdiocese of Naples, he says, as a political act.
Si tratta di un atto politico, non di una rivalsa.
This demonstrates that there's a flaw in the system, a system which tolerates certain behavior, but makes it so these behaviors are hidden, he told us. He admitted the dossier had scared off some priest clients, but not all, adding,
the libido is higher than the fear.
You signed.
We have to wonder, what's happening in the Catholic Church? The issue is not that so many in the church are gay. The issue doesn't seem to be sexual in nature, but rather why it must be hidden. First, inside the inner circles of the Vatican and the church as a whole. These priests are the clearest example of literally living in the closet. At Queer News Tonight, we think it's time for the church to come out. As Wisconsin's father, Greg Gritton, suggests, the church is his home. Watch this.
To work for an institution that thinks being gay, acting out on that is a sin.
Correct. But the difference is this is my spiritual home. This is where I was baptized. This is where I received my first communion. And so this is my home. And I don't believe that the home should be throwing out its children.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. You know, my first thoughts initially are really just to think about what does the Catholic Church represent to people today, and how does it really think about itself as a space for inclusivity? And for so many people it is, right? I mean, I grew up very Catholic, and for me it was a space of a lot of things, a lot of different feelings, and one of those things I feel like is coming out in this story is how it can represent so many different things to so many people, these kind of contested things.
And I think a big congratulations needs to go out to all of these priests who are living their true, authentic selves in their lives, and are coming out, you know, to the world, to their followers. You know, I think it's amazing that they're taking. It's very, very brave of them to do that, because there is going to be this tyranny against the institution. Because what's going to happen, you know, like you were saying about the Catholic Church, and you know what their stance is going to be, and they've made some steps towards that, I feel like, with this Pope, but I think there's a lot more work to be done.
You know, this is so topical. It's Holy Week, as we indicate in the story. We celebrate, if you're a Christian, Easter, Good Friday this week. I grew up Southern Baptist, not in the Catholic Church, but I couldn't help but think about my church and my growing up, and how many people were in the closet because they were forced to be in the closet. And I wonder how common this story is. That's my first note. My second observation is I honestly am breathtakingly shocked. Our headline reflects that the majority of priests are gay. The estimate of at least around half, maybe as high as 80% of priests are gay. It is a self-inflicted and institutional prison to be kept in the closet. And tremendous irony that these are the people that in communities all over America are leading the moral vision of our communities, but they are forced to live in prison. And I think that that is a shame. The Pope Francis statement last week that made world headlines and the church's statement has to be revisited. And I, outside the circle of the Catholic Church, suspect he is trying to find ways to do that and has not been able to do it yet. But this report that we do here for the LGBTQ community is not a rejection of the church. It is a voice of supporting the church. And we want to try to help encourage that.
I think that's right. Yeah. And create more space. Yeah. Now to queer up education. Tennessee bill would ban books that mention LGBTQ people from public schools. Tennessee lawmakers are continuing their push to be the most anti-LGBTQ legislative body in the nation. Republican State Representative Bruce Giffey, Republican, has now introduced a bill that would ban public schools from using books that mention LGBTQ people. House Bill 800 would ensure, quote, public charter schools shall not locally adopt or use in the public schools of this state textbooks and instructional materials or supplemental instructional materials that promote, normalize, support, or address lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender issues or lifestyle, end quote, according to the text of the proposed law. The bill says that mentioning LGBTQ people, quote, offends a significant portion of students, parents, and Tennessee residents with Christian values, end quote. The Education Instruction Subcommittee had the first hearings today. If signed into law, it would go into effect during the next school year. Just this year alone, the state has passed bills that would allow adoption agencies to discriminate against LGBTQ parents, ban transgender youth from playing school sports, and another bill under consideration would make the Bible the state's official book.
I think this is just such an awful story because it shows how these politicians are trying to legalize discriminating against people. And all I can think about is that, what are they going to go through textbooks and start sharpieing and crossing out, words and phrases and people? Because throughout our history, I'm sure there's a ton of LGBTQ folks who have never been out of the closet, including presidents and politicians and very famous people, athletes, that we don't even know. So I think this is, we're heading down a very dangerous path, and I don't think that this is right.
Well, first off, congratulations, Republican state legislature. You prove that you are among the dumbest people in America. First off, all of the new studies, big studies, prove that between 70 and 78% of all Americans support LGBTQ quality initiatives, including the Equality Act. That flies completely in the face of what we've just reported on in Tennessee. There's only one reason why: the ignorance of the Republican state legislature. Here's the proof of my observation. Let's take LGBT or gay completely out of this story and this new bill that is being proposed and the other bills that are going on in Tennessee. Let's remove LGBT. Now let's get into a time machine and go back to 1958 and insert the word black. And you would come to the exact same conclusion. You cannot promote black people in schools. You cannot normalize relationships with black people in any positive way at all. And that would have passed the state legislature in Tennessee in 1958. That is proof of your ignorance. Come on, Tennessee, stand up to your own Republican radical legislature.
You know, one of the things that I'm thinking about as I read this story is where are the youth itself, right? Where are they factoring young people? I think about what it means to be an LGBTQ young person, especially if we think about the disproportionate way that LGBTQ, especially LGBTQ of color, our students are vulnerable to things like homelessness and suicide. I mean, the numbers are extraordinarily high, and they're telling them, right, that they don't exist and that they don't matter.
Yeah,
and to kind of to reorient the conversation, maybe to end on this on a different note, some states have actually passed legislation to include LGBTQ history as there's part of their curriculum. California, Colorado, New Jersey, Illinois. And so, I mean, there's lots of work being done in these kinds of spaces that hopefully offer examples for how to move forward.
Just not Tennessee.
And I mean, just to add, is this not considered cancel culture? You know, they're trying to cancel these textbooks and the content that's in it. So it's okay when Republican legislators want to be able to erase our history, but then they turn around and blame liberals for everything else.
Yeah.
But next, we clear up politics. Missouri lawmakers refuse to remove defunct language banning gay marriage from state law. Gay marriage in the law of the United States of America. But Missouri lawmakers have refused to remove now defunct language barring same-sex marriages from each state law. Each year, state lawmakers pass legislation to remove language from outdated statutes as part of cleaning up the state's laws and ensuring they are still relevant and up to date. Again, lawmakers in the Republican-run state House of Representatives balked at removing the state's statutory ban on same-sex marriage. During the debate in the House, Democratic Representative Tracy McCurry from St. Louis proposed an amendment to repeal the statutory bans on same-sex marriage or out-of-state marriages to the House bills revising various statutes. But McCurry's amendment was rejected on technical grounds. The sponsor of the revision bill, Representative Dan Scholl, Republican from Imperial, said that revision bills cannot be amended on the floor and that the Joint Committee on Legislative Research had already determined what statutes to repeal, revise, or strike. McCurry points out that the Republicans have found effective ways to prevent the repeal of the law, a law that is only a symbolic symbol of the past.
You know, goodness, I've got a feeling, a very bad feeling, that I'm going to focus on ignorance tonight at Queer News Tonight. We talked about Tennessee and the tangible effect. Here's the intangible effect in Missouri. They are electing a small minority of Republican conservatives, but happen to be in control. They are fighting the majority will of the population of Missouri and America, and they're saying we would rather keep language on the books that is totally irrelevant and unenforceable in federal law, codified now by the Supreme Court. If that is not quintessential definition of ignorance, I simply do not know what is.
You know, I would just also add that language matters. You know, as people who really think about the significance of the humanities and the power of this kind of work to change, I mean, you're sending an important message, right? This is more than symbolic. It actually has an effect on the way that people understand themselves and people are understood by others. So language really does matter.
And I think this is just, and I won't say his name, but just continuation of the previous administration and a lot of the ignorance and the hypocrisies that came out of all the rhetoric. You know, now everyone is stirred up and all these Republican legislators and politicians are trying to keep that going. And it's just wrong. It's, like I said before, it's wrong to legally discriminate against people.
You mentioned he who shall not be named. Let me add ignorance one more. Well, let's queer up sports next. You have to watch this amazing Amazon Prime film about the world's first gay rugby club. Masculine sportsmen were called poofdas in Australia, faggots and worse. These are the haunting words that begin an inspiring and trailblazing film that follows Australia's King's Cross Steelers as they compete against 60 other LGBTQ plus rugby clubs across the world. After debuting at a number of film festivals, it will now be available to stream exclusively on Amazon Prime Video starting April 16th. Director and former Steelers player Amon Ashen Atkinson, who wrote, filmed, edited, and narrated the Amazon Prime feature, said, quote, "This story isn't just for rugby fans or even gay people. It's a story for anyone who has felt like they don't belong and isn't living the life that they want to be living." End quote. Watch this.
This is me, 12 years old, joining my first rugby club in Australia. And this is me now. I'm a reporter and a cameraman, so I'm used to telling stories, but I've never told one this personal. Poofter, faggot. The bullying was unrelenting, especially in sports class. So I never imagined that a rugby club would one day change my life.
Nerves? I found that I had these really great players who had a real lack of self-belief. I can be a really confident gay person, but on the sports pitch, that doesn't belong to me.
There's this element of being a rugby player, even as a gay rugby player, that there's a certain masculinity that you need to maintain. To me, that's bollocks. You know, I will be tough and brutal and kick your ass on the pitch. When I'm off the pitch, I will be as flagrant and as flamboyant as I want.
I'd never had depression before, but I was definitely at that, you know, like I was at the lowest of the low. And just when I was about to walk away from rugby, but something told me, no, rugby can still help you, then the club and this season saved my life, probably saved my life. You know?
The referee often doesn't recognise me, so I feel like I'm still needed to be validated by men.
That is all I want from you for 40 minutes. You absolutely have it in you. You get more in that time.
So for me, this isn't a coming out story or a story about winning a tournament or even about being gay. It's a story about searching for where you belong and never giving up, because you just might find happiness where you least expect.
Oh, I'm really excited to see that. I have to say, that sounds really inspirational. When I saw the run through for today's show and I saw Gay Rugby Club, I thought that sounded familiar, like a plot to another kind of film I may have seen in a previous. Anyway, no. I'm really thinking a lot about, as someone who plays a lot of sport. Growing up, I played a lot of sports, and now I play in a lot of gay leagues. My gay softball team in particular means so much to me. It's beautiful to see these stories, and beautiful to see the kind of embrace of so many different aspects of ourselves. The feminine, the masculine, and everything in between in this large spectrum. It sounds like a really great story that I'm excited to watch.
I can't believe there's 65 of these teams. that was incredible, and I've never been to Australia, so I would love to visit. But I think the movie looks incredible. I love the aspect that they're taking, because these guys just want to live their true, authentic selves, and they want to play sports, and they want to have fun, and they want to compete. And I think what an amazing story.
You know, I've been to Australia a number of times, and Australia and New Zealand are very big in rugby, and the Steelers are a beautiful story. They're the oldest gay rugby team in the world. It started in 1995, and when they started, there was no other LGBTQ or gay rugby team in the world. And when they tried to play other rugby teams in Sydney, when they formed, they couldn't get another team to play with them. And the justification and the reason was that you likely could catch AIDS.
That's crazy.
If you played against the Steelers.
Wow.
And what they did, it's really a beautiful story, because they went out and recruited other people to start other teams, just like your softball league.
That's amazing.
We'll have to have a movie night, Al.
I cannot wait to see
Oh, that's
movie.
beautiful to hear.
I just cannot.
Thanks. Now let's queer up South Florida. Broward House says, "Be our hero" during Dining Out for Life throughout April. Broward House is a not-for-profit social and service organization with over 30 years of providing services for our community, impacted by HIV and other chronic health challenges. In the pandemic, everything has changed. Never clearer than April, during their famous Dining Out for Life campaign, COVID-19 had all changed, all of that especially for restaurants that had been devastated. So April 2021, Dining Out for Life will be different. They're not asking for donations from the restaurants, but a campaign to raise money to support programs in a new way. The Be Our Hero campaign asks all of us to participate in a new way. Dine in, dine out, end HIV. Celebrate together. You can register on Broward House to participate in the campaign directly, and Queer News Tonight highly encourages your support. Go to browardhouse.org for complete details. Your community needs you more than ever.
What a great cause. And it's great that, we're starting to get back out and, people are starting to eat again and be social. So why not do all of that and support this amazing cause?
I have said about 375 times in the last 365 days that no one has been hit harder in pandemic than our drag queens and our 501c3 not-for-profits. You need to get out there and help Broward House because they are helping our community unlike almost anyone else in our community.
Absolutely. I just want to echo all of that. The significance of supporting these places, and they were doing incredible work in the absence of other places like the government that are not doing this kind of work. That is, they're filling in the void that is so necessary and so critical for so many, especially those most marginalized among us.
And now it's time to queer up sports again. This ad airing during the NCAA tournament names and shames lawmakers pushing anti-trans laws. March Madness has an entire new meaning. Can trans people play basketball in the NCAA basketball tournament? Not if more than 20 Republican state legislators have their way. It's why human rights campaigns have begun airing a commercial calling out the slew of state lawmakers and Republican governors for their push to enact anti-trans legislation this year. The ad made its television debut airing during the NCAA March Madness tournament game between Oral Roberts University, a college with an anti-LGBTQ history of its own, and the University of Arkansas. The version that aired specifically focused on Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, a Republican who just signed 2 laws that could harm trans people, and is posed to have another one delivered to his desk from the state legislature. This message is ironic. This message is powerful. Watch this.
In a year that has taken a toll on all of us, it is shocking that elected officials across the country are using their time and energy to attack LGBTQ kids, putting even more lives at risk.
These bills will only push more trans kids deeper into isolation.
Trans kids are kids. They don't deserve this cruelty. Shame, shame, shame.
The Human Rights Campaign is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Well, it's an amazing commercial. I was sitting there watching it right along with you. I think what's really interesting is I love the phrasing of the shame, shame, shame. It is an indication the HRC is making really great choices. What a perfect time to do it with Arkansas and Asa, I joke Asa Hutchinson, and Oral Roberts University, one of the most anti-LGBTQ campuses in the country, to run this commercial. Bravo. And it's irony in that that child that you saw in the commercial one day might not be able to play at the NCAA because being trans.
Shame, shame, shame is definitely the right kind of phrasing here and the important framework for us to remember. I mean, the focus today on so many of the headlines have been really about kind of the backlash that we've seen over the last few months after, and certainly no doubt years really, right, of a kind of change in political climate. We have to understand all of this as being interconnected because that's really what we're seeing in all these kind of spaces, that there's a reason why these things are coming out the way they are, and it's important and necessary to push back.
And shame on these politicians for spending so much time on this nonsense. These are kids, and kids just want to play. They want to play sports. They want to go to school. why are they doing this? There's more important issues that we need to tackle as a nation than stopping kids from playing sports.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our queer headlines for today. So let's catch up on the LGBTQ news surrounding COVID-19 with our special segment called Quarantine Quickies. Queer News Tonight has been LGBTQ America's most important news source on the pandemic, as we have reported on coronavirus on every news broadcast since January 6, 2020.
Tonight, we report the devastating effect coronavirus has had on the American and worldwide LGBTQ community in total cases and deaths. We also provide hope of a new light at the end of this long tunnel. As of tonight, more than 2,172,000 LGBTQ Americans have contracted COVID-19, and more than 39,000 LGBTQ Americans have died from coronavirus. As of today, more than 145,812,000 vaccine doses have been administered in the U.S.
Well, we queer up then quarantine quickies. Vax for Vax, taking over Grindr and vaccines as gay sexual currency. Oh, you ingenious gay boys, it was bound to happen. Guys are now regularly sharing their COVID vaccination status in their app profiles. Alex Garner, the Deputy Director of Gay Sexuality and Social Policy Institute at UCLA Luskin, wrote an interesting commentary for Advocate. He said, quote, "Every time I see it as a profile name or highlighted in profile on Scruff or Grindr, it makes me wince. It feels eerily similar to the clean UB2 trend that we've endured and pushed back against over the years. Vaccinations are a very great thing, but what exactly is the motivation for elevating your vaccination to some online status? And is stigma an unintentional consequence?" End quote. Garner is clear on the importance of COVID vaccinations for individuals and public health. However, he raises the concern on the desire to elevate one's vaccination status as a means to make oneself more desirable. Garner also raises questions about your sexual currency or your attempts to increase your social currency. He asks, quote, "What other reason is there to make one's profile name vaccinated or vaxxed or vax for vax? This is not health promotion," end quote. It is a clear attempt, according to him, to increase one's status online. It's being vaccinated being vaccinated is more desirable than it inadvertently advances the notion that those are not vaccinated are less desirable, and that creates trouble for all of us, end quote. From an LGBTQ community standpoint, he points out inconsistency in access to vaccine, the inequalities and racism in healthcare, and that we all do not have equal access. He points out how hard the LGBTQ community, and especially gay men, must work to address these inequalities. Garner stated, quote, "Using your vaccination as an attempt to make yourself more desirable online only serves to reinforce these inequities," end quote.
Goodness, vax for vax. I have to say I completely agree with Garner here. I think that it is eerily reminiscent of so many of the incredibly problematic and ways that people can assert their kind of sexual experiences in ways that can certainly expose, right, so many of the disproportionate ways that LGBTQ people experience lives differently, right? That is across racial lines or gender lines and class lines. The idea of access to healthcare is such an important key part here of this statement, and it's really important that we understand that it's creating new hierarchies of power that otherwise we all need to take these precautions anyhow, right? That is, COVID is all of our responsibility.
And it's funny and not funny. I mean, I've seen it on Grindr, or I've been told. Here in South Florida, you see some people putting that as their status. I think overall, everyone shares way too much information on social media, whether you've been vaccinated or you've gotten a stimulus check or what have you. But it does point out that a lot of people don't have access to these things, and it's really insensitive to be able to to separate yourselves out from everyone else and to create this level of acceptance in the community.
One more time, oh, you gay boys. Garner really hits the heart of it. We have gone through a traumatic event in the last 13 months, last 12 months for sure, and since lockdowns began. We have reported at Queer News Tonight repeatedly, you still had sex, even in the peak of COVID. Grindr was super active. His point is, it's not about sex. You're using the reference, he is suggesting, as a way to increase your social and sexual currency. If that is the case, you're doing it inappropriately because it is creating harm for many people that didn't have the same access that you had, especially the no fats, the no femmes, and the no Asians, because access matters. You had access, others did not.
Right.
That is his point.
That's it for our COVID-19 news for tonight. Next, we report that Happening Out Television Network is passionate about our support for the LGBTQ community. An example is Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. We are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine and supporting that partnership. The network broadcasts the largest LGBTQ religious broadcast in the world, with more than 30,000 watching every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and it's totally live. We encourage you to tune in. Our campaign of sponsorship proudly supports Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church. Watch this.
I'm Scott Galvin, Executive Director of Safe Schools South Florida, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living, here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this set and this amazing queer church campus possible. Finally, we thank Queer News Tonight's hotel sponsor, Best Western, I-95 Fort Lauderdale. This is the closest and best choice to the famous Wilton Drive, and our hosts and guests stay at this LGBTQ ally partner. We encourage you to stay here when visiting South Florida.
Well, up next, Queer News Tonight is proud to support our local influencers, personalities, drag queens, artists, and entertainers here in South Florida. And tonight, we are happy to feature Rajee Narine-Singh. Got it right, Narine-Singh. She is an American, you already know her, of course. She is an American transgender activist, actress, author, singer, mystic, and a reality TV personality.
So excited. Born in Brooklyn and raised in Philadelphia, her father was of Asian Indian descent from Trinidad and Tobago, and her mother is a mix of French, African American, Native American, and Polynesian. She is most known for her appearances on talk shows including Dr. Phil, Trisha Goddard, Anderson Cooper, and 35 other TV shows worldwide, goodness, discussing her experience with black market injections that was passed off as medical grade silicone.
She also has acted in a number of film productions, has a memoir out called Beyond Face Value, and has appeared on E! Network's Botched. Her main focus is to continue to do her global activism, such as traveling up to the Capitol with Ariana's Center, touching the world in many positive ways, and spreading love in her own unique way.
Well, to tell us more about how to spread love, peace, happiness, good health, prosperity, and many blessings is trans activist, actress, and author Rajee Narine-Singh. We're very happy to have you here tonight at Queer News Tonight. Good
Thank
evening,
you so
Rajee.
much for having me. My goodness, and what an introduction! I mean, like my ego is like going out the building.
Well, you deserve it. Speaking of ego and introduction, a little bird has told me that something's getting ready to happen in a news story in Marie Claire.
Can you believe it?
I absolutely can. Tell us about what's happening there. I'm really curious.
Well, when I got contacted, I was absolutely surprised, okay? Because let's face it, I'm a trans woman of a certain age, okay? And I've been through some things. So when you think of Marie Claire, you think of like, you know, young and beautiful and high fashion. And so when they contacted me, I was like, wow. But see, you know what? That shows that the true beauty is from within. And obviously, they've connected with that. So I'm going to be doing an online presentation tomorrow, and then I'm going to be featured. They're going to do a little article on me.
Oh, that is awesome. Now, of course, everyone, all of us, we were talking about this when you arrived in the studio about E's botched. Who has not watched that episode? Since that beginning and your activism continues in terms of the trans community, how is the general reaction to you? You are an institutional name in the trans community. You're Bianca Del Rio in the drag community. You are that in the trans community. How today does the LGBTQ community embrace you today?
Wow, well, first of all, you're going to make me start crying. Thank you so much for saying that. There was a time where I wasn't any of that. I knew it inside that I was, but, you know, people weren't very nice. And let's face it, we live in a world that is very connected to visual beauty, you know, and so for many years I walked around with a very disfigured face. And so after like my story went viral and I ended up on doing all the shows and reality TV called me, oh my gosh, it was giving me an opportunity to really show Rajee, you know, and people were connecting with that. And let me tell you, the first Pride I went to after my first season on Botch, I couldn't even walk 5 steps. And people were someone would stop me. Oh my gosh, oh, your story is so inspiring. Thank you for all that you do. And so with a humble heart, I accepted that because it just felt so good that finally a lot of people were seeing my love and light. And I was just so thankful. And, you know, for anyone that's going to take time out of their busy day, especially at Pride, when there's all these hot boys running around, to stop and tell me, you know, that I've inspired them and thank me. I mean, it was just such a wonderful thing. And that's continued. I'll be anywhere. I'll be at the market, the post office, the gas station. And the little old lady from Iowa who was in the airport that walks over to me, our lives have nothing in common, but she saw my story and she's like, oh my God, you were so inspiring. There's something to say for that.
You know, Rajee, so that's reaction in our community, prides, etc. How was the reaction to people that are not familiar with you in the general population community? What kind of reaction do you live with on a daily basis?
Wow.
What is it like to be Rajee and walking through the life that you walk through?
Yeah, it's it can be challenging, I have to say. You know, people that like in the non-LGBTQ community that saw me on Botch and know my story, oh my God, it's like 90% love. You know, like I said, people that I least expect, like, you know, the little white lady from Iowa that was probably in her 80s that came over and said hello. But the ones that don't know my story, that is another story, another story. I mean, really.
Are you treated badly?
Yes, I can be. You know, it used to be a lot worse, and I think it has something to do with the climate of trans in this community, because more people are like, you know, educated and they know about trans. At least when they see me, it's like, oh my God, what's that? You know, they've been exposed in some way. But, you know, I still get the stares and you know, people laughing.
Does it hurt?
Of course it hurt.
Yeah. Even now, even with everything that you've been through and your level of experience of this, it hurts even still today.
It does, but it doesn't beat me down like it used to. It doesn't beat me down like it used to. Before, I would be almost paralyzed and so hurt to my core. Now, I kind of let it, slide off like, water on a duck's back.
Yeah, well, that is good. Rajee, one of the observations that you make, I just have to seed in here. We just reported this recently at Queer News Tonight. There was a very significant study that was done, a survey of American public attitudes toward the trans community. And there was a very sizable percentage, way over majority support of the trans community. And one of the things that came out of this very big study that we reported at Queer News Tonight was that when people became more educated about the trans community, the more accepting that they became. Their rejection was ignorance. So as a result, with what you've been through, and especially over the last 4 years, the trans community has been made the wedge issue of LGBTQ by radical evangelicals and the radical far right, extreme far right, but that's not the majority of the American community. But I'm curious, what does an activist like you, how do you respond, how do you react to what you're seeing in some of the state legislatures and some of the most conservative Republicans, what they're doing to the trans community and how they're responding? How do you feel about what you're watching right now?
Well, first of all, I want to say that sometimes I have to actually pinch myself because as a transgender, multiracial woman of color, I can't believe I'm here. All that I've been through, all the discrimination and the physical attacks that I've gone through, that I'm still here to see today and to see that we have taken some steps in equality and equity. When I see people, these conservative far-right people trying to pass these ridiculous laws, first of all, backlash comes to mind. Fear. Fear of the unknown. I think if people took time, and today there's no excuse. Google, we walk around with phones in our hands, they're computers. You can research a topic and know a little bit about it. So it is very, very distressing, and it's just their way of continuing to suppress the LGBTQ community.
Yeah. Rajee, did I just hear you make a comparison to your story and Celie in the color purple? You're here. You survived. I can't believe it, but I'm here.
Listen,
God.
Hey, listen, that was a great movie, okay?
Yeah.
So thank you for the compliment.
Yes, it was a compliment. Where do you see the trans activism that you represent and the trans community? What do you see is going to happen next? What do you hope is going to happen next?
Well, listen, let's face it, I'm a bit of a dinosaur here in South Florida. So I think I probably worked with every single LGBT outreach organization at some point. Ariana Center, Trans Inclusive, and now I'm with Trans Social as an outreach activist. So we're doing a lot of wonderful things. We were fortunate to get some grants, so we're providing groceries for the community, assistance with bills like, light bill and internet bill. And so when you're able to do those things for the community, it's more of like an empowering, uplifting energy. And I think that what we need to do as trans people and LGBT people, because let's face it, we're all family, and there's power in unity, is to continue the fight. Ashley Mayfair, one of the directors of Trans Social, she said this the other day. She says, Rajee, this is a life's work. We might not live to see the full extent of equity and equality for the trans community, but at least we're gonna help with the fight, and hopefully, if not our generation, generations to come will get there.
Rajee, I quite imagine in 1969, Marsha P. Johnson could have said the exact same words that just came out of your mouth. And we're still fighting in our community, and Marsha P. Johnson didn't get to see it. Sylvia Rivera didn't get to see it, but it didn't mean that those dinosaurs that you just referred to didn't set the path for everyone in our community, and we thank you for those efforts. Rajee, Narine-Singh, we are thrilled that you have been with us here tonight at Queer News Tonight.
Thank you for having me, and I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing for our LGBT community. It's nothing like, you know, taking control, you know, having a news outlet that can tell the news the way we like to tell it and, you know, inspire and uplift our community.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And we, again, we thank you for everything that you're doing. And you've got a lot of years of advocacy ahead. You're not getting off the hook yet.
Oh my God.
We've got a lot of work to do.
I feel like an 80-year-old woman.
Well, we'll give it another 25 years before we get to that point.
Okay.
All right. Well, that is, again, thanks, Rajee, for being with us tonight at Queer News Tonight. Well, that is today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ evening news show. Is our community important to you?
Goodness, yes. And after that, I'm so emotional for so many reasons. Thanks for sharing that story with us, Rajee. Then help us by liking and subscribing. Ring the bell for updates. Share this news.
We're the only LGBTQ television live video news in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of anchors Dr. Julio Capo Jr. and Cal Gajraj, we will see you daily and tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Good night.